Hey, you ever wondered what medieval marriage was actually like? Not the fairy tale stuff. Not the Hollywood banquet weddings with slow-motion veil tosses and romantic horseback escapes. I mean the gritty, hay-strewn, contract-bound reality of two strangers, or cousins, shaking hands under a smoky church roof while half the village watches like it's the latest episode of a medieval reality show. Tonight we're slipping into the sandals and ankle-chafing woolen hose of medieval newlyweds. From awkward betrothals to marriage bed rituals, we're pulling back the tapestry to see what love, duty, and social climbing really looked like when surnames were still negotiable. Let's ease in. Picture this. It's early morning in a bustling village nestled between rolling hills and a suspiciously aggressive goose population. The air smells of wood smoke, bread crusts, and anxiety. Why? Because today is a wedding day, but not the kind where people get cold feet. Oh no, today is the day two families merge assets, secure alliances, and try very hard to make sure no one marries too close a cousin. Which, spoiler, didn't always work. You see, marriage wasn't always about love. It was about sheep, or land, or the fact that your neighbour's daughter had childbearing hips and a dowry the size of your uncle's entire herd. If you were a peasant, marriage meant joining forces to survive the winter. If you were noble, it meant signing over your daughter's womb in exchange for 20 barrels of wine, and maybe a claim to a slightly nicer hill. And speaking of daughters, if you were one, you didn't get much say in any of this. From the age of 12, yes 12, girls could be married off. Not necessarily consummated, at least not always immediately, but definitely paired like livestock at auction. Sons fared slightly better, if only because they might get to choose between cousin Anna and merchant Hugo's nervous-looking daughter. So here we are. The town square's been swept. The ale barrels are rolled out. Someone's uncle is already drunk. The priest arrives late, muttering in Latin, and starts the ceremony with all the enthusiasm of a man who's had to preside over 3 weddings, a confession, and a pig blessing today alone. Vows are exchanged, more contractual than romantic. You pledge to honour, to keep, to not abandon even during leprosy outbreaks or famine. Then comes the bedding ceremony. Oh yes, this is not a private moment. This is a public event, where witnesses literally walk the bride and groom to the marital bed, throw a few jokes about virility and virtue, and then sometimes watch, just enough to confirm that the marriage has been properly sealed. Romantic, right? But let's zoom out from the wedding and step into the everyday life of a married couple. If you lived in a thatched cottage, you and your spouse probably shared your bed with your kids, your goats, and possibly the neighbour's cat. Privacy was a rumour. Affection was practical. A back rub after long days in the fields, or an extra crust of bread saved from supper. Love grew slowly, like moss on a stone wall. Or didn't. And then you just learned to argue in whispers so the kids wouldn't wake. Among the upper class, things weren't much more tender. Marriage was strategic, ceremonial, and often long distance. Lords might leave for campaigns or court duties for months at a time. Ladies oversaw the estate, wrote letters, and hoped their husbands came back with all limbs and no new heirs. Let's not forget the church. The church had opinions. Many of them. You couldn't marry your 6th cousin unless a bishop signed off. You couldn't marry someone of another faith unless you were converting them. You couldn't divorce unless you convinced someone that your spouse was secretly a witch, or already married, or dead. But even then, good luck. And yet, despite all this, people did fall in love. They shared stolen kisses behind barns. They composed bad poetry. They carved each other's names into wooden spoons. Because humanity will always find a way to be sappy. even when courtship involves more mud than music. Now imagine yourself walking down a muddy lane. A husband is bargaining for salt at the market. His wife barters for fabric. Children tug at skirts. A neighbour waves. The baker's son is getting married next week, they say. The gossip begins again. Was the dowry fair? Was she promised to someone else first? Did anyone see them walking too close near the river? Because in the medieval world, marriage was not just a personal affair. It was the town's business. It was politics, economy and community rolled into one. And whether you were a ploughman or a prince, your wedding day was just the beginning of a very long, occasionally muddy road. Before we dive back in, let me know where you're listening from. If this journey chills you in the best way, subscribe. Tomorrow, I have another story for you. We pick up on the road again. The lane winds past fields already sown, past the open shutters of a spinning house where wool whirls into thread, past a group of children pelting each other with clumps of muddy straw, shouting something about who gets to pretend to be the bride this time. That's how common weddings are around here. They've become village theatre. Let's walk deeper into the town, down toward the main square. It's market day. You hear the rattle of cartwheels over cobblestones and the rhythmic hollering of vendors who could out-yell thunder. Bread, salted fish, dyed ribbons, iron nails, and of course, matchmaking gossip. It flows thicker than honey here. She's 16 and still unbetrothed, one woman whispers behind a bundle of onions. A bit too proud for her own good, if you ask me. Oh, but have you seen the new Carpenter's Apprentice? Says another, elbowing her friend. Tall, strong arms. He'd make a fine provider. You can practically smell the intrigue in the air. A mix of fresh apples, livestock, sweat and courtship. And that's the thing. In the medieval world, courtship was a social sport. It didn't always involve flowers or poetry. Sometimes it was a long look across a sheep pen. Sometimes it was a discreet inquiry into a girl's dowry value while pretending to buy butter. Now, let's head toward the manor. The noble class plays a different game altogether. Behind high stone walls, under brightly coloured banners, marriage negotiations happen in private chambers over wine and parchment. If you're lucky enough to eavesdrop, you'll hear terms like 3 acres adjoining the orchard and a promise of loyalty to House de Clermont. Love? That's a luxury for minstrels. This is estate expansion. Inside, a young lady sits quietly while her future is debated by older men who all smell faintly of fox fur and overconfidence. She picks at her embroidery and tries not to cry. She knows she won't meet her husband until the wedding. Maybe not even until the wedding night. She's been raised for this. To bear sons, to keep household accounts, and to wear dignity like armour. But let's not get stuck in the noble halls. Back to the village. Down one muddy path, behind a low stone wall, there's a small church. Nothing glamorous. Wooden beams, a humble bell tower, a priest who limps slightly from an old farming injury. Here, marriages are blessed. The priest knows everyone. He saw the bride when she was christened, saw her at first confession, and now sees her with trembling hands and a new dress patched at the elbows. The groom waits with his friends, awkward in boots a size too big. When they take their vows, it's more sacred than grand, more sincere than strategic. The priest makes them promise to be faithful, to support each other, to raise children in the church. Then comes the part the villagers love, the shout of joy, the clapping, the shared ale. A sheep is roasted, songs are sung, boots stomp on the ground until the whole crowd sways with rhythm and drink, and when the stars rise and the candles flicker low, the newlyweds are led away. That's right, led. Not left alone. A small crowd, often the entire family, escorts them to their bed, tossing jokes like rice. It's part ritual, part proof of consummation. part community theatre. A bit horrifying by modern standards, but back then, standard practice. Now let's spend some time in the daily grind. You and your spouse, if you were peasants, would live in a one-room house. That means cooking, cleaning, arguing, loving, raising children, nursing the sick, and surviving storms, all in one space. No doors to slam, no private corners to sulk in. You get used to each other fast. You share chores. If your partner is sick, you haul extra water. If you're both healthy, you joke while threshing grain. If your child has a fever, you argue over which herbal remedy works best. Life is built on little tasks, and love, if it comes, is slow and steady. A hand squeezed after harvest, or a crust of bread tucked aside for later. But married life isn't just cosy cottages. It can be brutal. Childbirth is dangerous. Illness is common. Sometimes a marriage ends early, through plague, accident, or famine. And there's no therapist, no hotline, no romantic comedy soundtrack. You mourn together or alone. You remarry, often quickly, because survival comes first. Among the merchants and townsfolk, marriage comes with bookkeeping. Your spouse might help run the shop or count coins at the end of the day. They might be literate. They might keep letters. A merchant marriage is more like a partnership. You gain status if your spouse is savvy, educated, or well-connected. Let's peek inside one such house. A woman counts coins behind a linen counter. Her husband is away, trading spices. Their son is learning Latin. Their daughter just got a proposal from a candle maker. The woman sighs and does the math. The dowry would stretch their savings, but the match is stable. She sends word via the baker's wife. That's how arrangements start. Now back outside to the streets again. The town crier yells the banns of marriage. A public notice shouted for 3 weeks before a wedding to allow anyone to object. If any man here knows a reason why this union should not proceed, and so on. It's less romantic when shouted next to a manure cart. This whole process, the discussions, the banns, the bedding, it's built to make marriage a communal event. You don't just marry a person, you marry a family, a village, sometimes a whole dynasty, which means everyone has a say, whether you want them to or not. Oh, and let's not forget the church again. The church loves a good rule. You can't marry during Lent. You can't marry in secret. You can't marry your godparent. You definitely can't marry if you're already promised to someone else, unless that person happens to die, conveniently. Clergy themselves, technically not supposed to marry, though in some places a wink and a nudge turn that into a grey area. Records show some priests had unofficial housekeepers who mysteriously bore several children. But who are we to judge medieval HR policies? And still, love blooms. In taverns, in harvest festivals, behind stable doors. There are dances, stolen kisses, whispered promises. There's risk, especially for women. Premarital scandal could ruin lives. But it happens. Always has. Because even when marriage is arranged, affection can creep in. Sometimes real love starts after the vows. We close today's walk at the edge of the village, where an older couple sits outside their cottage sharing a bowl of stew. They don't talk much. They don't need to. The dog lies by their feet. The fire crackles. A wind stirs the trees. They've weathered it all together. And maybe that, in its own way, is love. This story took us a long time to gather. If you're finding it worth the cold, subscribe, and now back to the hearth. And now the hearth is crackling again. You feel it, right? That faint scent of wood smoke in your nose, the creak of the old stool beneath you, the weight of a wool blanket across your legs as we lean back into this world, where marriage was less about heart-shaped eyes and more about surviving the chaos together. Let's open the door on another scene. Picture a rain-slicked street in a small port town. Boats bob in the harbour, their ropes groaning in rhythm with the tide. Fishmongers shout their last offers. Above it all, the bell from the abbey rings out its cold, clear chime. Inside a stone house overlooking the water, a young couple argues softly over a ledger. They're married, but only just. The ink on their union is barely dry. He's a journeyman cooper, a barrel maker. She's the daughter of a textile merchant, clever with numbers, sharper still with her tongue. They married not for love, but for the joining of businesses. Her father offered a modest dowry and a thread of status. The cooper brought a strong back and a warehouse. Now they run the household together. You wouldn't think it to look at them, but this couple could climb. If they save enough, if they train their children right, if they dodge illness and scandal, they might raise their family up into the burgher class. Not quite nobility, but close enough to attend feast days and hold a little influence at the council. This is marriage as a ladder. But just a few streets over, things look different. We step into a tanner's home. It stinks. That unmistakable stench of animal hides soaking in lye and urine. The walls are stained, the tools well used, the floors always wet. The tanner's wife works beside him. Her hands are as calloused as his. They barely speak as they labour, not out of coldness, but familiarity. Their marriage was arranged by two sets of parents who lived only a cart ride apart. There was no dowry, no grand feast, just a promise, a priest, and a goat roast. Still, they've made it work. In the evenings they share soup and stories. She sharpens his knives. He mends her shoes. It's not romance, but it is loyalty. And loyalty is its own kind of love. Now, if you turn sharply and follow the scent of rosemary and warm bread, you'll come upon the home of a midwife. Her marriage is a quiet one. Her husband tends the herb garden. He was once a carpenter but lost 2 fingers in an accident. Now he helps where he can. She teaches apprentices. They live modestly, but with pride. Their wedding was modest, their life is modest, but their bond is powerful. She wakes at all hours to deliver babies. He keeps the fire going and makes sure she has clean cloth and boiled water when she stumbles home before dawn. There's intimacy in that rhythm, in being known. Let's pan out now, back beyond the walls, out into the countryside. There, a lonely traveller follows the path between 2 villages. He stops to ask for water at a farmstead. A woman answers. Her husband is in the fields. She invites the stranger to sit, to rest, and offers a bit of oatcake. She married young. Her first child was born the same year she turned 15. Her days are long. She tends the hearth, the children, the chickens. Her husband is decent, though not affectionate. He provides. She manages. Their marriage isn't fiery, but it's steady. And yet, she sometimes dreams. Of music, of dancing, of a wedding that didn't begin with a handshake and a bride price. She doesn't regret her life, but she does wonder. Just a little. But not everyone marries. Spinsterhood isn't always a tragedy. Some women become nuns, escaping the burdens of childbirth and housework for a life of devotion and stability. In the convent they find sisterhood, scholarship, even governance. A nun might run a priory more efficiently than any lord runs a manor. Other women remain unmarried for different reasons. Maybe they couldn't afford a dowry. Maybe they were seen as too plain, too mouthy, too clever. Maybe they simply chose not to wed. They live with siblings, or take in sewing, or serve in a noble house. They are often pitied, sometimes mocked. But they also carry their own freedom. And what about widows? A curious case, those. Once a woman becomes a widow, she gains a strange power. She's no longer under her father's thumb, nor her husband's. She can own property. She can manage her own money. She might even remarry, but only if she chooses. Some widows become wealthy landowners. Others run businesses. A few become matchmakers themselves, deciding which young pairings will be fortunate or fraught. But let's peek into a feast, a noble wedding, a hall filled with banners and roasted meats and strong mead. This is a political alliance. The bride wears a gown that took 5 weavers 6 weeks to complete. The groom, a young knight with a chin too sharp and a smile too smug, barely glances at her. He's thinking of land, of horses, of power. The guests are here for spectacle. The jesters tumble. The wine flows. The bride keeps her eyes low. She knows what's expected. She's 16 and already trained to run a household of 20 servants. She knows the inventory of the cellars by heart. She knows what herbs help with conception. She knows when to speak and when to smile. She is ready, or at least she has to be. After the feast, the couple disappears to their chambers. The bedding ceremony here is more formal. Just a few witnesses, a signed document, still intrusive, but less raucous. The servants whisper as they close the doors. The next morning the bride emerges wearing a circlet of woven gold. Her hair is unbound. She nods at the chamberlain. The marriage is complete. Now the games of estate management begin. We shift again. Let's listen in on a priest's sermon. He speaks of marriage as sacred, a holy bond blessed by God. He warns against adultery, against unions forged without consent. He quotes saints. He quotes scripture. But you can see the irony, because half the congregation knows he once courted the brewer's niece. The villagers squirm on the benches. Some believe deeply. Others simply go through the motions. But all of them understand marriage is more than a sacrament. It's a structure, a means of survival, a social net. Outside, after the sermon, deals are struck. Marriage is arranged. Futures decided with nods and coin. A marriage broker counts her fees. A young boy stares at a girl across the square. He doesn't know her name, but she smiled at him once during a May Day dance. He'll remember it for years. And even in this web of rules and rituals, of chores and compromises, there are sparks. They hide in small gestures, a saved apple, a patched tunic, a flower left by the bed. Not every couple finds joy, but some do. Some grow fond over time. Some make each other laugh even when the thatch leaks and the firewood's damp. And isn't that a kind of love too? The stars rise again over our imaginary village. A lute plays softly. A couple walks hand in hand toward their home. Chickens cluck. A candle flickers behind the window of a scribe's house, where someone writes a letter asking for a daughter's hand. History sleeps now, but we'll wake it up again soon. The letter is sealed with wax and pressed with a family crest, a lion slightly lopsided. The scribe sets it gently aside, letting the ink dry while the candlelight flickers across the folds of parchment. That single letter could determine a lifetime, maybe 2. A match proposed, a dowry discussed, a lineage extended like a careful line drawn across a map. In the medieval world, that's how so many marriages began, not with a glance or a touch, but with ink. Let's trail that letter as it travels, carried by a young messenger with dirt under his fingernails and a crust of rye stuffed in his satchel. It makes its way across hills and rivers, through fog-drenched forests and sleepy hamlets. He stops at inns, sleeps in barns, dodges wild dogs, and finally delivers the letter to a stone house tucked into a narrow valley. The house belongs to a lesser noble, a man with more pride than property, who reads the offer with furrowed brows and then calls for his wife. They discuss the proposal not as parents but as accountants. Is the match respectable? Will it strengthen our ties to the Baron? Can we still afford new boots for Gerard if we give her 2 goats and the silver cup? Their daughter, 16 and quiet, listens behind a tapestry. She already knows what the answer will be. She doesn't cry. She just adds the name of her future husband to the mental list she's been keeping since childhood. This one seems bearable. Not cruel, not old, not too distant. That for her is good enough. Elsewhere, we follow a different kind of letter. This one is passed in secret. No wax seal. Just a folded bit of vellum tucked beneath a market stall. It smells of lavender. It is a love letter, tentative, poetic, and mildly terrible. Written by a baker's apprentice to a smith's daughter. They know their families won't approve. The smith wants his daughter to marry a brewer's son. The baker's boy has no land, no inheritance, but he writes anyway. And she reads it, again and again, by the light of a stolen candle. That, too, is marriage in the medieval world. Quiet hope in the face of loud expectations. Let's stroll again, this time into a larger town where guilds shape the economy like the ribs of a whale. Here, marriage is more than personal or even familial. It's institutional. If you're a goldsmith's son, you marry a goldsmith's daughter. Not for love, not even necessarily for alliance, but for trade protection. Keep the secrets in the family. Keep the power consolidated. In the goldsmith's home, wedding preparations feel more like inventory. They count bolts of silk, tally coins, measure casks of wine. The ceremony will be well attended, not because people are close, but because everyone wants to see who marries who. Gossip is the real guest of honour. But further down that same street, beneath a worn wooden sign shaped like a pig, a butcher and his wife prepare for their son's wedding. The bride is shy, but sweet. Her family breeds geese. The butcher likes her. She doesn't flinch at blood. That, to him, means she'll do just fine. Their house smells of salt and lard and a little bit of old onions, but it also smells like warmth, laughter, stew bubbling on the hearth. The butcher's wife braids herbs into the bride's hair. He snores, she tells her, but he'll keep you warm in winter. And then there's the feast. Not the noble kind, but the honest, boisterous, slightly sticky kind. Children run between tables. Someone drops a whole pie. A fiddler plays with only 3 strings, but twice the energy. When the couple dances, it's clumsy but sweet. They laugh, they trip, they kiss under the beams of the barn, surrounded by cheering cousins. The town watch passes by, rolls his eyes and keeps walking. He's seen 100 weddings. He'll see 100 more. The dawn mist clings to the thatch like a reluctant guest, and you can practically taste the dew on the air. As we step into the 5th chapter of our medieval nuptial tapestry, imagine yourself on a narrow path leading to the annual fair of St. Cuthbert, a place where the promises of marriage and whispers of romance mingle with the tang of roasted chestnuts and the jangle of minstrels' lutes. The fair is a crossroads, not just for traders, but for heart-seeking connection. Colours swirl before your eyes, deep indigo banners fluttering alongside stalls draped in emerald cloth, the golden glint of polished pewter tankards, and the flash of a well-oiled blade at the swordsmith's forge. You hear the coo of a dove breeder boasting about his finest pair, the merchants' practised calls hawking silk ribbons from distant lands, and the curious chatter of farmers trading gossip under the watchful gaze of a stone effigy of St. Cuthbert himself. Near the enchanting aroma of spiced mead, 2 young women pause before a booth of carved wooden toys. One is a noble-born seamstress, her skirts trimmed in scarlet and her hair braided tight against her scalp. The other is a peasant's daughter, her dress patched but clean, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Despite their different worlds, they giggle together, inspecting a pair of wooden swans that slide along a string mechanism. The seamstress touches the peasant girl's arm, her voice low. Do you think your John would like one of these? It might cheer him after the harvest. And the peasant girl nods, eyes sparkling with gratitude and something deeper, perhaps the flutter of first love. Here at the fair, alliances are stitched with laughter, and the threads cross social boundaries even when official betrothals cannot. But let's pivot sharply to another scene. In a nearby orchard, where the trees stand in neat rows and the scent of apples is thick in the breeze, a young couple leans against a sturdy trunk. He's a blacksmith's apprentice, his fingers blackened by coal and tempered steel. She's a potter's daughter, her hands perpetually dusted with clay. They met by chance when she brought her wares to market, and he offered to help carry them for a few pence. Now she tilts her head and laughs at one of his clumsy jokes, and he drops his gaze to hide the warmth in his eyes. He offers her a ripe apple, careful not to stain his calloused hands with juice. She takes it, breathes in the crisp fragrance, and bites. The crisp crack echoes like a tiny symphony in the orchard's calm. Their laughter drifts upward, mingling with bird song, and for a moment the world beyond the trees, the contracts, the dowries, the church's watchful eyes, feels miles away. Beneath the canopy, you see the texture of a life, the rough bark of the apple tree, the soft moss cushioning their feet, the scattered petals on the ground like confetti. The sun filters through leaves, casting dancing shadows across their faces. It's a simple moment, unrecorded by any priest or scribe. Yet here, in a quiet glade, two hearts learn the language of marriage outside ceremony. Trust, tenderness, shared silence. Not far off, at the edge of the fair, a travelling minstrel sets up his afternoon show. His lute case remains open for coins as he tunes the strings. A knot of onlookers gathers. Among them stands a widow, her veil drawn lightly to hide the silver streaks of her hair. She claps politely at the minstrel's performance, but her thoughts are elsewhere, on the son she lost to the plague last spring, on the empty bed beside her, and on the fragile possibility of hope rekindled in spite of sorrow. The minstrel's song shifts to verse about a daring knight and his beloved, a tale where the heroine rescues her groom from an ogre's lair. The widow listens, lips pressed together, and then allows herself a small smile. In those verses she hears echoes of her own love story, the one that existed before grief rearranged her world. In that moment the fair becomes a stage for memory as much as merriment. Now, stay with me as we step into the pungent darkness of a cellar beneath a merchant's house. Olives soak in brine, barrels of wine age in shadow, sacks of grain are stacked high. Here, a freshly married merchant and his wife conduct the ritual of ledgers and weights. She dips her quill, tall as she is cautious, and he adjusts scales with practised fingers. Numbers flick across parchment. Debts, credits, promises to repay. Their marriage is spreadsheets and strategy, each ledger entry a stanza in the poem of their life together. And though their union may seem dry, it hums with unspoken respect. He trusts her arithmetic. She relies on his negotiation skills. Their partnership is pragmatic, yes, but rooted in mutual competence. When disputes arise, over shipment delays or a disagreeable tax, they settle them with discussion, compromise, and sometimes the careful flap of a worn leather-bound contract. Yet life is never only bean counting. Beyond the cellar's door, the trader's wife secretly practices her husband's foreign language, Latin, whispering phrases as she kneads dough for the morning's bake. She dreams of reading the letters he brings from afar without relying on his translation. It's a small ambition, but one that warms her spirit like a hearth fire. This story took us a long time to gather. If you're finding it worth the cold, subscribe. And now, back to the hearth. As dusk falls on the fair, lanterns flicker like fireflies among the booths. The scent of smoke and roasting chestnuts deepens. Laughter turns huskier as ale loosens tongues. A new bride, dressed in simple white linen, steps into the melee, clutching her husband's hand. He's a huntsman, his boots caked in clay from the forest floor. She steadies him with a reassuring squeeze. Together they step toward a booth where a fortune teller, a woman with grey-streaked hair, a face creased by years of sun and wind, beckons them. Your union is blessed by years of shared laughter and patience, the seer intones, her voice echoing softly. But beware the silent storm. When words go unspoken, storms rage beneath calm waters. She places a rough hand over the new bride's palm. Remember to speak, to listen, to forgive, and you will thrive. The couple nods gravely, then smiles at each other as they walk away, mouths curved like crescent moons. The lanterns bob overhead, the barrels of mead await, the fair's music shifts to a haunting flute, and somewhere in the murmur of the crowd, new vows are made in silence, new promises woven into the tapestry. With the sky turning from pale rose to deep indigo, our journey through medieval marriage's many faces continues to unfold. In every market, manor, barn and forest glade, you can witness weddings born of necessity, alliance, affection or chance. And beneath them all lies the universal thread. Two people, bound together, forging a life by candlelight and contract, by laughter and ledger, by longing and loyalty. Now rest your feet for a moment, for the road ahead will wind us through tales of ceremonies that shift empires, of marriages undone by scandal, and of love that blooms in exile. But for now, draw deep breath, and let the rhythm of medieval life carry you gently onward. Morning light filters through a narrow slit window, illuminating motes of dust dancing above a four-poster bed draped in coarse wool. You step into the chamber of a retired knight and his second wife, an arrangement born not of youthful passion, but of pragmatic restoration. The knight's first marriage, glorious, celebrated, ended abruptly by plague, left him rich in lands but impoverished in comfort. His new bride, a widow herself, brought a modest dowry and a steady hand. Together they've built a gentle rhythm. He teaches her tactics of estate defence. She shows him herbal remedies for aches that linger long after the sword has been sheathed. They share a quiet breakfast of porridge and honey. When he reaches for her hand, there is respect, and that, they've discovered, can grow into something resembling companionship, if not romance. Let's pull back into the grand tapestry again. Imagine a bustling crossroads town where travellers convene, and marriage choices include not only local alliances but plots stretching across borders. Here, caravans arrive from far-off realms, bringing silks from Byzantium, spices from the Levant, and tales of strange customs. Among the merchants, a match is proposed between a wealthy spice trader's daughter and a Venetian ship captain, an alliance promising profit, prestige, and a precarious balance of power on the waves. Their betrothal is shouted aloud in the bazaar. She will bring cinnamon and cloves, he will bring safe passage to Alexandria. The traders clap coin into their hands, the crowd murmurs in fascination, and the pair exchange polite bows under a fluttering canopy of coloured cloth. Still, in quieter quarters, romance simmers away from public spectacle. In a modest home near the city walls, a young woman practices calligraphy by candlelight. Her fiancé, a scribe in the chancellery, has taught her to write her name in flourishing letters. They exchange notes smuggled in birch-bark scrolls. He writes of treaties and royal decrees. She writes of the stars, the scent of lilacs in spring, and how her heart flutters when his ink-stained fingers brush hers. Beyond the walls, on the estate's orchards, the steward's son meets his bride-to-be for lessons in grafting and pruning. She is the steward's niece, a match arranged strictly for pragmatism. Yet, As they work side by side among the apple trees, their hands muddy and nimble, conversation halts only when a robin alights on a branch above them. He reveals he once thought marriage unnecessary. She laughs and corrects him. It's not the promise of a title or profit that matters, but the promise of someone to share your burdens. They pause and let the silence, rich with birdsong and earthy fragrance, become their companion. Back in the heart of the town, peals of church bells beckon for a group marriage, a rare communal blessing where multiple couples take vows together on Michaelmas Day to economise on the priest's fee. Brides in dresses of various hues line up with their grooms, hands trembling but faces bright with anticipation. The priest's sermon weaves the couple's fates into a single tapestry. Like the fields that flourish under shared rain, so too can marriages prosper when community stands witness. The couples recite their vows in unison, voices resonating across stained glass windows. Revelry follows. In the courtyard, a dance begins, not the reserved minuets of the noble court, but a rollicking circle dance where everyone links hands, stomping boots in time. A butcher's apprentice trips over the tail of his bride's dress, and they both tumble laughing into the hay. A merchant's daughter and a blacksmith's apprentice spin until dizziness steals their breath. The laughter is a song unto itself, weaving bonds stronger than any contract. But venture to the edge of the festival, where the walls are weak and the moonlight casts long shadows. There, a secret courtship unfolds. A young cleric, bound by vows of celibacy, meets with his aunt's maid under a stone archway. She offers him a lock of her hair braided with a ribbon. He presses a small carved cross into her palm. They know the risks. Scandal would ruin his career, exile her family. Yet they exchange a longing glance before parting, the night air thick with regret and desire. Across a field, a news spreads. A noble's son has abandoned his bride on the eve of their wedding, fleeing to join a crusade. The bride, left alone in her father's castle, weeps before a tapestry depicting the Virgin Mary. Her father swears vengeance. Her mother stitches black into her daughter's veil. In the grand hall, courtiers murmur about dishonour and shame, while servants slip the maid a veil of white and instruct her to retreat to the convent until matters settle. Here we glimpse how marriage and destiny entwine. A single decision, flight, faith, fury, can reshape a lineage, ignite vendettas, or seal alliances with new fervour. In medieval times, the personal was never truly private. As dawn breaks on our story again, we find ourselves by a winding river. Two elderly women sit on the bank, once sisters-in-law, now left to share memories of their husbands, both lost to time and conflict. They fish in silence, casting lines into gentle currents. One breaks the quiet. "Do you remember the day I married your brother? He was so pompous he tripped over his own cloak." The other chuckles, knotting her line. "And do you remember how the cook used cumin instead of caraway?" They laugh until tears mix with their smiles. Not every marriage ends in bitterness or betrayal. Some survive long enough to become legends whispered beside hearths. The river's current carries away petals from a nearby flowering tree. In their drifting, we can see the flow of centuries, marriages woven into the fabric of history, each one a thread in humanity's grand tapestry. Rest here, by the murmuring water. Feel the medieval world's heartbeat, the clang of forges, the hush of libraries, the song of larks at dawn. Marriage was its mirror, reflecting duty, survival, ambition, and sometimes, against all odds, tenderness. When you're ready, we'll move on to stories of alliances that toppled kingdoms, of tragic loves that inspired legends, and of vows that defied death itself. Until then, let this river's whisper lull you into the next chapter. Across a field, a news spreads. A noble's son has abandoned his bride on the eve of their wedding, fleeing to join a crusade. The bride, left alone in her father's castle, weeps before a tapestry depicting the Virgin Mary. Her father swears vengeance. Her mother stitches black into her daughter's veil. In the grand hall, courtiers murmur about dishonour and shame, while servants slip the maid a veil of white and instruct her to retreat to the convent until matters settle. Here we glimpse how marriage and destiny entwine. A single decision, flight, faith, fury, can reshape a lineage, ignite vendettas, or seal alliances with new fervour. In medieval times, the personal was never truly private. As dawn breaks on our story again, we find ourselves by a winding river. Two elderly women sit on the bank, once sisters-in-law, now left to share memories of their husbands, both lost to time and conflict. They fish in silence, casting lines into gentle currents. One breaks the quiet. "Do you remember the day I married your brother? He was so pompous he tripped over his own cloak." The other chuckles, knotting her line. "And do you remember how the cook used cumin instead of caraway?" They laugh until tears mix with their smiles. Not every marriage ends in bitterness or betrayal. Some survive long enough to become legends whispered beside hearths. The river's current carries away petals from a nearby flowering tree. In their drifting, we can see the flow of centuries, marriages woven into the fabric of history, each one a thread in humanity's grand tapestry. Rest here, by the murmuring water. Feel the medieval world's heartbeat, the clang of forges, the hush of libraries, the song of larks at dawn. Marriage was its mirror, reflecting duty, survival, ambition, and sometimes, against all odds, tenderness. When you're ready, we'll move on to stories of alliances that toppled kingdoms, of tragic loves that inspired legends, and of vows that defied death itself. Until then, let this river's whisper lull you into the next chapter. Dawn's first light blushes on the horizon as you step onto the creaking wooden bridge that spans the misty river, where two kingdoms once stood at odds until a marriage brokered peace. Here begins our next tale, a union that shifted borders as much as hearts. Imagine a land divided by rival banners, each bearing emblems of proud households. Field walls scarred by skirmishes, villages rebuilt on blood-soaked earth, pilgrims crossing battle-weary roads praying for deliverance. In this crucible of conflict, a treaty is drafted. The Princess of Albrecht will wed the heir of Montclair. Their marriage, they say, will unite warring realms under a single crown, if they survive the politics that lurk beneath the gilded page. At dawn, the princess emerges from her minster's chapel. White silk drapes her like a spring breeze. Lilies woven into her hair scent the corridor with purity. She pauses at the chapel doors, mind racing between duty and dread. She whispers a prayer to St. Agnes, patron of virgins and brides, asking for courage. Outside, nobles and commoners alike bow as she passes, their eyes bright with hope and speculation. Across the water, the young lord waits, clad in polished mail, but with nowhere to hide the tremble in his gauntleted hand. He's heard rumours that the princess's advisers demand half the western vineyards as her dowry, that spies lurk in his retinue. Yet, as she steps onto the drawbridge, the cold steel in his chest is warmed by her steady gaze. The ceremony unfolds beneath a canopy of white and gold. The archbishop's voice echoes against stone walls as he binds their hands with ribbon. What God has joined, let no man sunder. The crowd murmurs, some in reverence, others in scepticism. In the hush, you almost feel the pulse of destiny. Then comes the feast. Tables sag under peacock roasts, sugar sculpture towers, and flagons of elderflower wine. Minstrels strike harp strings. Jesters tumble through puddles of spilled ale. The princess and her new lord exchange polite sips from the communal cup, mindful of court etiquette. But amid the fanfare their eyes meet, and for a fleeting moment they see each other not as heirs to thrones, but as two souls navigating the unknown. Later, when the hall clears, they retreat to a balcony overlooking the river's winding ribbon. The princess breathes deep. "I almost believed I could never feel anything but duty," she confesses. He nods, offering his cloak against the night chill. "Nor I," he admits. "Yet here we stand, two strangers bound by politics and prayer." She laughs, a sound like bells, and in that shared laughter blooms the fragile seed of something more than duty. Meanwhile, back in the villages, the news of this grand marriage travels among peasants and merchants and soldiers returning from the front. In a tavern near Albrecht's border, a farmer's daughter raises her mug. "May their union hold," she toasts, "and teach us peace." Her companion, a veteran with only one eye, grunts in agreement, but his scarred knuckles betray a lifetime of war. But peace is never simple. Whispers spread of factions unhappy with the treaty, nobles who feel slighted, bishops who bristle at power shifts. In the dead of night, envoys ride between keeps bearing secret letters, call off the match or else. Along dusty roads, cloaked figures slip into stables under torchlight, whispering sedition to weary grooms. The morning sun stretches gold fingers across the rooftops as you find yourself in the shadowed cloisters of a grand cathedral, where the scent of incense lingers like memory. Columned arches recede into twilight, and the hush is broken only by the echo of distant chants and the drip of dew falling into stone basins. Here, among novices and clergy, we encounter a marriage quite unlike any we've met so far. One of souls entwined by faith and devotion, but fraught with the tension of ecclesiastical vows. Picture Brother Matthew, once a knight who traded chain mail for a cowl after a battlefield vision left him shaken. His hands, once wielding sword and shield, now cradle a rosary as he kneels in prayer. And beside him, Sister Agnes, a woman of family fortunes who left a life of luxury to seek spiritual solace. She learned to read and tended the sick, her heart drawn more to the suffering than the sumptuous. Their bond, formed in the refectory over shared loaves of bread and whispered verses, is deeper than simple affection. It is a communion of purpose. Yet the Church's strictures stand like silent witnesses. Priests should not wed, monks should not love, and nuns should not court. Their clandestine affection unfolds amid flickering candles and the rustle of habit. They exchange glances as they light candles for the dying, share water from a single chalice, and find solace in shared scripture passages. In those moments, Matthew stands taller than any knight, and Agnes shines brighter than any noblewoman. But a love forbidden is a fire that kindles rumour. A novice notices the way Matthew's prayer lingers when Agnes approaches. A kitchen maid sees Agnes brush a speck of dust from Matthew's robe with a tremor of tenderness. And soon suspicion coils through the cloister like a serpent. Father Bernard, the strict prior with a voice like thunder, watches from the choir stalls, discerning too much warmth when the two pray side by side. Word reaches the bishop in the neighbouring dioceses. He dispatches a letter sealed in scarlet wax, an inquiry into charges of impropriety within the sacred walls. The prior convenes a council of elders beneath the vaulted nave. Candles gutter. The air feels thick as old secrets. Matthew stands tall, robes heavy on his shoulders, as Father Bernard hurls accusations. "You have forsaken your vows. You have made mockery of our sacred calling." Agnes, proud even as her hands tremble, replies with quiet authority, "We have forsaken nothing but fear itself." In the hush that follows, you can almost hear the beating of every heart present. There, Behind ancient pillars, faith and love collide, and the lines between sacred duty and human longing blur. But this is medieval life, where every path forks between rules and desire. While the council debates elsewhere in the city, marriage takes on another hue, that of celebrity spectacle. Outside the cathedral's gates, news of a noble wedding captures popular imagination. Sir Tristan the Bold, renowned for slaying a drake that terrorised the countryside, is to wed Lady Isolde, famed for her charity work and her beauty. Their courtship, though sanctioned by church and crown, has captivated bards and scribes. Poems circulate in taverns about their first meeting, how he rescued her from a runaway carriage, how she repaid him with a healing salve for his wounds. On the eve of their wedding, minstrels gather beneath market stalls, singing ballads that blend fact and fancy, Tristan's heroic deeds, Isolde's gentle virtues, the mischievous fox cub that stole their gloves during a hunt. Townsfolk hang ribbons from doors, children wave branches of willow in unison. Even the town watch, whose daily beat involves little more than herding cats and quieting drunks, takes a moment to hum the tune. The morning dawns bright. A temporary aisle of flowers stretches from the castle courtyard to the makeshift altar. Guests arrive on horseback, in litter and on foot. A retinue of banners, each bearing their intertwined sigils, a sword and a rose, ripples in the breeze. The ceremony is shorter than expected, but no less moving. Vows exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers, and kisses bestowed amidst cheers that shake the very rafters of the great hall. But before the couple can retreat behind closed doors, a messenger bursts in, an invitation to feast in the king's presence, for the union is declared a boon to the realm's unity. So, they mount their chargers once more, side by side, and ride toward the royal court, their banners snapping against their backs like wings. Meanwhile, in a quieter corner of the kingdom, marriage takes on a seasonal rhythm, a festival that celebrates partnership in harvest and hearth. On Mabon's Eve, the autumn equinox, villagers gather in the cornfields to honour gratitude and abundance. Married couples bring baskets of apples, ears of corn, and braided wreaths of straw. They dance beneath a canopy of lanterns strung along wooden posts. The music changes as the night deepens, from lively jigs to slower, swaying melodies. Here, marriage is a festival of shared labour and shared reward. Husbands and wives toss handfuls of grain into the air as an offering. They join hands in a great circle, chanting blessings for the next planting. Elders lead blessings while children tie ribbons to a maypole-like staff. The craftsmanship of their wreaths, some plain, some adorned with acorns and oak leaves, speaks to the individuality within the community. In the circle's centre, an older couple stands crowned with a wreath of ivy and grapevines, symbols of endurance and prosperity. They have been married 50 years. Their faces are lined with stories. Wars endured, famine survived, children raised, grandchildren born. When they step into the circle, the assembly bows their heads, and a hush falls before spontaneous applause erupts. Their marriage is legend. As midnight approaches, torches are extinguished, and the crowd moves to the warmth of a great bonfire. Sparks leap skyward, laughter and song fill the air. Couples stroll away from the firelight, sharing whispered words of hope and planning their futures, some practical, some playful, some daring. Beyond the flames, in the fields limitless under moonlight, you might find secret vows exchanged. Hand-fastings meant to last but a year and a day, promises that flourish in the liminal space between seasons. These temporary unions, blessed by folk custom rather than church decree, offer lovers a glimpse of commitment without the weight of a lifetime's bond. And so we wander on, from cloistered scandals to royal pageantry, from communal harvest rites to whispered hand-fastings. The medieval world's approach to marriage is as varied as the tapestry's threads, a weave of love and duty, of strategy and spontaneity, of faith and festivity. Rest for a moment in this mosaic of vows. Feel the echoes of chants in the cathedral, the clash of swords in the tournament, the rustle of leaves in the harvest fields. Each marriage we've visited reflects the era's complexity and humanity's enduring desire to bind life with another's. When dawn breaks again, we'll journey into tales of heartbreak that changed kingdoms, of secret marriages that saved lives, and of devotions that defied death. But for now, let the candle gutter low, and let the stories of forbidden love and festive unions linger in the hush before sleep. At dawn's first glow, a solitary bell tolls across the valley, calling the faithful to the funeral of a bride whose story ended too soon. In the tiny village of Evesworth, fragrant wreaths of lavender and rosemary adorn the chapel entrance, mixing with the salt of tears and the musk of damp peat smouldering in the hearths. This is not a wedding feast, but a mourning, for marriage's shadow is loss. The young woman lies dressed in her wedding gown, silk the colour of storm clouds, with her hands clasped around a single white rose. Her husband, a local squire, kneels beside her coffin, his helm removed and his face pale beneath the morning light. No trumpets announce his grief, only the low murmur of villagers filling the pews. You can feel the weight of their shared sorrow, as heavy as the stone walls that enclose them. It was supposed to be a union of promise. The bride, daughter of the manor's steward, and the squire returned from a season of service abroad. Their marriage would secure loyal bonds between lord and vassal, and perhaps echo that first grand alliance that once brought peace to warring realms. Instead, fever struck on the eve of their departure, and the bride slipped away in the night's quiet hours. In the burial ground, the priest, his voice unsteady, reads the liturgy. "Into your hands, O Lord, I commend her spirit." The words hang in the bitter air. A mother clasps her shawl tighter. Children huddle at doorways, caught between curiosity and dread. The squire stands, his knees trembling as the coffin descends. He lays a single gloves, embroidered with his own sigil, across her folded hands. Then, with a final clasp, the earth covers her. From this sorrow we turn to a different scene. The court of Lady Rosalind, a widow of notable repute. Draped in velvet, the hue of midnight, she sits beneath an arbour of grapevines in her walled garden. Her gaze drifts to a messenger who carries a sealed scroll bearing the official pardon from the king, granting her permission to remarry after a stipulated period of mourning. Rosalind's first marriage was to a baron known for his cruelty as much as his curiosity. He vanished during a campaign and was presumed dead, leaving her land and title in precarious balance. Rumours whispered of his crimes, of his neglect, of his final, fateful rebellion against the crown. Now, with his name cleared by royal decree, Rosalind holds the choice that few medieval women possessed, whether to pledge herself again. She unseals the scroll with fingertips that tremble only slightly. The parchment crackles. The words grant her liberty, but also remind her of the strict observance of propriety. She may choose among suitors, lords who seek her favour, knights who honour her cause, or poets who woo her with verses written on petals. As the afternoon sun shifts, a soft knock comes at the garden gate. A young knight steps through, clad in mail that has known both tournament and battlefield. He bows deeply, so deeply that his plume brushes the gravel. "My lady," he begins, voice rich with sincerity, "I offer not only my sword, but my heart." Rosalind meets his eyes. In his stance she sees echoes of her lost husband's bravery, and yet she senses gentleness beyond the battlefield. She invites him to walk among the vines. They wander in silence until he pauses near a trellis, where grapes hang in heavy clusters. He plucks one, hands it to her, and allows her to taste its sweetness. Their eyes lock over that small gesture, and for a moment she considers the possibility of hope once more. But medieval society abhors a vacuum. As their whispered conversation unfolds, across the seacoast in the bustling port of Havenshaw, another marriage grapples with treachery and intrigue. In the grand mercantile hall, a prominent merchant named Marlowe stands before his bride, an heiress from the prosperous Lothridge family. The hall's columns gleam with oil lamps. The air is thick with incense and anticipation. The newlyweds share a civil nod. Neither trust the other completely, for their union masks a web of debts and debts owed. Marlowe's coffers are swollen but strained. His father-in-law's fortune depends on his timely voyages. Their marriage contract stipulates contingencies on trade yields, dowry payments, and even the birth of a male heir within 5 years. It is marriage as mercantile manoeuvre. Behind the velvet drapes, a clerk records every clause. Legal minds hover like vultures, ready to swoop if any guarantee falters. Yet, amidst that sterile precision, Marlowe catches his wife's glance and briefly glimpses delicate hope beneath her courteous demeanour. Perhaps, despite the ledger's cold figures, 2 hearts might yet balance the scales. Night falls, and we return to the squire's lament in Evesworth. At the inn where once laughter echoed, now only candles burn beside an empty chair. The squire pours ale into 2 mugs, one for himself, one in memory of her, and toasts the quiet room. As he raises his mug to the empty seat, his voice trembles. To you, my love, wherever you may roam beyond these fields. He drinks, and the candle flickers low. In the hush after grief and politics, we glimpse life's unpredictable turns, marriage bound by blood, by law, by love, or by circumstance. Whether in courtly gardens, on windswept battlefields, within chapters of cloisters, or beside humble hearths, vows tethered mortals to one another's fates. And as midnight's final bell tolls, a lone minstrel appears at the chapel's doorway, lute in hand, ready to sing a lament for the fallen bride and a ballad for the hopeful widow. His first chord resonates against the tombstones, weaving sorrow and promise into a single haunting melody, one that will echo into dawn's uncertain light. The sky above the castle courtyard is a wash of early morning pink as you make your way through winding corridors to witness a marriage meant to cement dynasties and reshape borders. Here, at the grand halls of Durendale, the union of Lady Eleanor of Westmarch and Lord Philippe of St. Clair stands at the crossroads of power and diplomacy. Their betrothal has been months in the making, whispered through chancelleries, sealed in clandestine treaties, and debated by courts on both sides of hostile frontiers. Imagine ancient stone turrets wrapped in climbing ivy, banners emblazoned with lions and fleur-de-lis snapping in the breeze. Torches line the great hall's arched windows as trumpeters herald the arrival of the bridal procession. Eleanor, clad in a gown spun from threads of platinum and sapphire, moves with measured grace. Her train, held aloft by maidens in green and gold surcoats, sweeps across tapestries depicting Westmarch's storied past. Battles won, lands won, kings crowned under its banner. Her eyes, a stormy grey, betray both steely resolve and trembling anticipation. Behind her follows Philippe, a sculpted figure in steel and crimson, his heraldic device, a golden fleur encircled by a garland of oak leaves, proud upon his tabard. His gaze traces Eleanor's path as he stands awaiting her at the altar carved from black marble. The crowd hushes as she approaches. Even the minstrels pause their harps' trill and lutes' strum to catch the moment when two lines of lineage converge into one. Their vows are spoken in Latin, echoing against vaulted ceilings. Suscipio te, Eleanor, in conjugem meam, et promitto tibi fidem, et aeternam dilectionem. Accipio te, Philippe, in conjugem meam, et promitto tibi honorem et devotionem. The pronouncement is the hinge on which decades of peace and possible war balance precariously. When the Archbishop intones, Quod Deus conjunxit, a murmur sweeps through the assembly. History turns another page. Following the ceremony, the feast unfolds. Tables under vaulted arches groan with spiced venison, sugar-studded pastries, and flagons of mead so potent it glows golden in torchlight. Nobles and knights exchange cautious glances over goblets, sizing alliances by the silverwork and silk fabrics of each guest. In one corner, envoys debate trade tariffs. In another, poets recite newfound odes to the bride's beauty and the groom's valour. Yet behind the velvet drapes and silver platters, intrigue simmers. A ring too small for Philippe's finger, meant for a secret mistress, lies hidden in a velvet pouch. A messenger bearing a tragic missive about a border skirmish arrives too late. Eleanor will learn of it only tomorrow. But for tonight, the couple dances beneath flickering chandeliers. Eleanor's gown shimmers like moonlight. Philippe guides her with unwavering courtesy. Their steps are practiced yet sincere, as though they've rehearsed this partnership for years rather than weeks. Each turn, each bow, each whispered word beneath velvet canopies hints at the possibility that duty might yet blossom into affection. As the dancers whirl, we slip away from the courtly scene and tumble into the battered tents of camp followers outside the walls. There, among patched canvas and smouldering fires, marriages take on a harsher reality. A mercenary captain dubbed Crimson Gareth has wed a camp healer known only as Sister Brinna. Their union, forged in the smoke of battle and the cries of the wounded, is less about ceremony and more about survival. Under a makeshift arch of leather straps, they exchange simple vows over ration bread and whiskey, promising to watch each other's backs when steel sings and wounds fester. By contrast, let us move beyond the clangor of steel and the hush of cathedrals to a seaside village where marriage customs follow the rhythm of the tides. On the cliffs of Cliffhaven, surfers of both wind and wave, but today brides and grooms gather under driftwood arches carved by local craftsmen. Here, the ritual is simple. A ring woven from sea grasses, a promise whispered to the sea foam, and a communal dance around bonfires whose flames mirror the wild dance of breaking waves. A fisherman named Torin marries a weaver's daughter, Maricel, whose hands know both loom and knot. They stand barefoot on sand softened by centuries, and as Torin ties the seagrass ring around Maricel's finger, foam rushes in to swirl around their ankles. She laughs, and the seagulls cry overhead, nature itself offering its blessing, before they dip into the surf together, emerging soaked but radiant. In another quarter, a clerk and his betrothed exchange marriage, contracts by lantern light in a scribe's workshop. Ink flows freely across parchment as each clause is read aloud. Provisions for dowry, the rights to property, the guardianship of future heirs. Their ceremony is understated. The smell of ink is their incense. Yet their partnership hums with intellectual synergy. She as literate as he, they share platonic affection born of mutual respect and scholarly ambition. Draw your eyes now to the forested glade where a pagan ritual resurfaces among those still tethered to pre-Christian customs. Here, couples bind themselves with ribbons dyed in elderberry. Smouldering herbs ward off misfortune, and vows are spoken to gods of harvest and hearth, rather than Christ or Allah. These hand fastings, often lasting a year and a day, operate in the fringe of legality. The couple will present themselves to the church afterward, seeking formal blessing once the harvest is complete. Until then, they live as if wed, sharing bed, board and burdens, without the weight of eternal bonds. Back in the royal courts, preliminary whispers suggest Philippe and Eleanor's pact may unravel should a scandalous love letter surface, purportedly written in Eleanor's hand to a mysterious suitor before her engagement was arranged. The letter's authenticity remains in question. It lies hidden in the Duke's private chambers, awaiting either confirmation of treachery or the relief of vindication. As dawn tiptoes back into our tale, let us touch upon one final scene for Canvas 10, the quiet sanctum of a midwife's cottage on the edge of the wildwood. There, amidst bundles of dried herbs and steaming cauldrons, a weary mother and father cradle twins, boys born in hardship, whose inheritance will hinge on their marital prospects. The midwife, cradling a knife sharpened for ritual use, murmurs blessings under her breath. She has witnessed too many unions end in sorrow to offer platitudes. Instead, she presses a sprig of yarrow into the new mother's damp palm, a symbol of healing and resilience. The parents exchange a glance, exhausted, hopeful, terrified. Their vows, spoken under the weight of both joy and fear, carry all the gravity of contract and the tenderness of profoundly human longing. And so, as the dawn's rose-pink glow warms the thatched rooftops beyond the forest, our tapestry of medieval marriages unfolds in ever-new patterns, alliances of kingdoms, partnerships of battlefields, rites of seaside sands, pacts in scholarly workshops, revivals of ancient rites, and private unions marked by resilience and hope, rest now in this convergence of vows under sky, sea, and stone. Let the tapestry's threads, woven with destiny, devotion, dread, and desire, linger in your mind's eye. When you awaken, we'll journey deeper into the marriages that reshaped dynasties, defied dogma, and kindled legends enduring beyond the reach of history's eraser. Dawn's hush settles over the mist-laden fields as you wander toward a humble farmhouse, where marriage binds not only hearts, but crops. Here, in a valley where soil yields rye and barley under the watchful gaze of alder trees, two farmers stand shoulder to shoulder, faces flushed with early light. Mark, a sturdy man whose hands bear calluses from ploughshares, and Elspeth, whose nimble fingers weave pitchfork tines with hay, have pledged their lives to shared labour. Their wedding was a simple blessing beneath a wooden pergola woven with garlands of wheat and clover, witnessed by neighbours who brought fresh milk and honey cakes to the feast. The morning aroma is thick with dew and earth as they move through rows of young shoots. Side by side they inspect the sprouting grain, comparing its vigour to last season's yield. Elspeth runs her hand along a stalk, flicking away a clinging dewdrop. "It looks promising," she murmurs, voice soft as the breeze. Mark nods. "Better than last year," he replies, eyes warm. "With you by my side, I reckon we'll have the best harvest this valley's seen." They exchange a smile that speaks of trust more than words can carry. But medieval marriage in the fields isn't only about shared dreams, it's also about shared survival. A sudden chill wind rattles the leaves. They glance at the western hills, where storm clouds coil like restless spirits. Without a word, they move to reinforce the barn doors, securing planks with iron clamps. Elspeth passes her hammer to Mark and steadies the timber. In those coordinated movements, love and duty converge. Now, let's shift our gaze to an urban tapestry contrasting sharply with the rural rhythms. The crowded streets of Verdrin, a boisterous city whose walls are carved with ancient runes and whose markets overflow with exotic wares. In a courtyard off a narrow alley, A merchant's daughter named Liana orchestrates her wedding day. Her family has long traded in fine silks and rare dyes, and today's marriage solidifies a partnership with a wealthy cloth dyer from across the sea. Liana's gown is a cascade of dyed velvet, turquoise fading to deep cerulean, each shade extracted from crushed lapis and indigo. Her betrothed Javier stands before her, robes patterned with golden thread. They exchange rings beneath an awning of dyed linen, petals drifting down like confetti. City folk lean on shutters and door frames, cooing at the spectacle. Yet, as ceremonial drums beat and trumpets herald their union, shadows linger in the alleyways. Rumours swirl that Javier's previous ventures ended in betrayal, loans unpaid, partners swindled. Liana, wise beyond her youth, watches the murmur of caravans arriving and departing, her mind calculating potential risks. Marriage in the marketplace is as shrewd as it is celebratory. She steps forward, voice clear. I pledge not only my hand, but my counsel. The crowd oos. Javier inclines his head and replies, and I, my honour and my efforts. In that moment, vows become contract, and contract becomes covenant, both economic and emotional. Stepping outside, they find a stall selling sweet pastries spiced with cardamom and honey. Together, they buy a small tart, share it, and savour the warm sweetness in private, an intimate communion amid commerce. Meanwhile, far from farmhouse and market, in the silent vaults of a secluded monastery, brother and sister bind hearts in a fleeting reflection of familial devotion. A lay brother, Thaddeus, emerges from silent prayer to greet his sister Seraphine, who sought refuge among the cloister's stone corridors. Though not a marriage by church decree, their bond, sealed by vows of mutual support, echoes a spiritual kinship deeper than blood. They exchange verses in Latin and Old Tongue, calling each other frater and soror, reminding themselves that sacred ties can surpass those of matrimony. Their ritual involves shared verses of psalms, shared bread, and shared stewardship of the garden where roses blossom beneath meditative silent arcades. Now let's traverse to a woodland glade where a bridesmaid's misstep sparks a cascade of laughter. The bride, Isolde, has chosen a celebration unlike any other, an open-air wedding where guests recline on mossy logs and tablecloths are blankets strewn on the forest floor. Isolde, daughter of a falconer, exchanges rings with Rowan, a hawker's son who sold birds of prey at nearby fairs. They tie a simple cord of braided heather, flowers echoing her father's sanctuary, around each other's wrists, promising to soar together. When the bridesmaid trips on a gnarled root, she topples a pewter tankard, and mead spills among the ferns. Isolde chuckles and helps her up, her eyes bright. Rowan raises his own cup. To unexpected spills and the sweetness they bring, he toasts, and the guests cheer. Finally, we draw near to a winter's hearth, where marriage takes on a coziness born of long nights and cold winds. Inside a stone cottage, smoke curls from the chimney as a carpenter and his wife carve wooden dolls together, tokens for their first child, due come in bulk. Their marriage, sealed in the warmth of the solstice, glows with domestic warmth, shared fires, knitted blankets, and whispered dreams of spring. The carpenter, Hartwin, whittles a small cradle while his wife, Margaret, threads needle through cloth for tiny swaddling gowns. Outside, wind rattles shutters. Inside, love hums in steady rhythm. And so we leave canvas 11 with scenes of field, city, cloister, glade, and hearth. Each marriage a mirror reflecting the myriad ways humans seek connection. Some are bound by land, some by ledger, some by faith, some by forest, and some by firelight. Each one a testament to the endless dance between duty and desire. Rest here if you will. Breathe the scents of earth and ink and incense and pine and smoke. Tomorrow we'll explore marriages that broke boundaries, defied edicts, and unleashed legends. For now, let this patchwork of vows carry you towards slumber. Quiet now, the village lies swaddled in mist and moonlight, each thatch and cobblestone softening under silver haze. Yet beneath the silence, life thrums, hearts still beating with the echoes of vows spoken and tales yet untold. Today, we journey into marriages forged not by grand ceremonies or lofty ideals, but by the unforgiving crucible of survival. At the edge of a vast moor, under a sky heavy with storm clouds, we find Agnes and Joffrey, two souls bound by necessity. Agnes is a healer whose knowledge of herbs saved Joffrey's life when he fell from his trading cart, fevered and delirious. Their union was not planned. As part of a customary life debt, Joffrey swore to wed the woman who nursed him back to health. The day they married, the wind howled across the moor, lashing reeds against their feet as they stood between two standing stones, hands wrapped not in silk but in strips of linen dipped in moonlit water. They exchanged no rings. Instead, Agnes placed a sprig of yarrow in Joffrey's lapel, and he offered her a simple iron girdle from his waist. There were no witnesses save for a lone priest who had stumbled across them, offering hurried blessings before fleeing the rising gale. Yet, in that unadorned moment, vows were made, to tend each other's wounds, to share meagre blankets against the frost, to speak truth, even when tongues stuttered with fear. As dawn breaks, Joffrey ferries Agnes across boggy tracks to gather bog myrtle and angelica. She stoops to study each root, instructing him on which to harvest and which to leave. They work in silence, the only sounds the whisper of wind and the soft drip of dew from windswept grasses. When a distant thunderclap jars them both, Joffrey sets down the basket and takes Agnes's hand, finding in her steady gaze the kind of courage that no battlefield can forge. Back in the village proper, we slip through narrow lanes to the home of a blacksmith named Rodebert, whose first marriage ended in tragedy when his bride died in childbirth. Years passed before he dared to love again. Then came Eleanor, a travelling minstrel whose voice could coax tears from stone. They met when Eleanor performed a lament for the fallen bride in the village square. Rodebert's hammer paused mid-strike, and in that suspended moment, he saw not grief, but beauty, raw and redemptive. Their marriage was as unconventional as their meeting. No priest presided, no formal contract was drawn. Instead, they circled an anvil in Hrodebert's forge at dawn, Eleanor's song rising above the rhythm of hammer on iron. Sparks flew like fireflies as they pledged loyalty with a simple gesture. Hrodebert dipped Eleanor's fingertips in forge-quenched water and guided her hand to shape molten iron into a single horseshoe. The cooled shoe, inscribed with Eleanor's name, became their symbol, forge and song united. Inside their humble cottage, love flows like molten metal, furious at times, unpredictable, yet capable of forging something strong and enduring. Eleanor writes verses by candlelight while Rodebert sharpens his tools. They share bread and mead, argue over the final line of a song, laugh when sparks flicker, and sometimes weep together when the night seems too long. Now let us wander to Wulfhilda's watchtower on the windswept coast, a lonely place where land and sea collide. Wulfhilda, a widow twice over, serves as warden of the beacon, warning ships of hidden shoals below storm-lashed waves. She married her first husband, a fisherman, young and full of sea-brine laughter. He drowned on a moonless night. The second marriage was an arranged union with the coastal baron Steward, a man of stern countenance who died of fever in the winter months. When the tower's timber began to rot, no noble volunteered to marry Wulfhilda to keep their inheritance. She proposed to Ethelstan, a travelling carpenter she met while repairing the beacon's timbers. He arrived with hammer and saw, working atop the ladder at her side. She offered him shelter. He offered skill. They married on the rocky promontory, exchanging vows carved into the wooden balcony overlooking the churning sea. "As long as this tower stands," she declared, "and as long as the beacon burns, so shall we stand together against storm and solitude." Their marriage blends duty and devotion. Wulfhilda tends the lantern while Ethelstan crafts new planks for the walkway. In the storm's darkest hours they lean on each other, hers a steady presence, his a guiding hand. Crossing from coast to wood, we arrive at a druidic circle hidden deep within the forest. Here, the festival of Beltane awakens old traditions, and couples come to pledge seasonal unions. This year, a pair stands before ancient oaks, Rowan, a shepherd whose sheep graze these woods, and Aisling, a weaver whose tapestries depict the forest's heartbeat. They join palms, and a druid chants in the old tongue, "From flame to leaf, from stone to sky, we bind, we bless, we testify." A circle of wildflowers at their feet swirls with petals, and the forest itself seems to exhale in approval. Their vows are fleeting, only until Samhain, when the veil thins again. But within that single season, their bond blooms like bluebells in spring, destined to fade yet unforgettable in its fleeting brilliance. Finally, we step into a candlelit interior of a mercantile guild hall in the bustling city of Greyhaven, where the marriage of convenience takes on a labyrinthine form. Lady Marian, heiress to the guild, marries Lord Edmund, a nobleman fallen on hard times. Their union is stipulated not only in gold but in the exchange of knowledge. Marian gains noble protection, Edmund gains access to trade routes. Their ceremony reads like a contract, clauses for inheritance, for title, for dowry, but also an unusual clause granting Marian agency in the appointment of guildmasters. When Edmund reads this aloud, the assembled lords exchange wary glances. Few women wield such formal power. Marian stands tall, her voice clear. In trade as in life, partnership demands equality. And though Edmund's smile is tight, he inclines his head in respect, acknowledging that their bond may change the guild's future forever. In the hush after their signing, a scholar steps forward with ink and quill, recording the unusual clause. Marian takes Edmund's hand as parchment glides between them, a silent testament that marriage, in whatever shape it takes, can be as much about forging new paths as preserving the old. Night drapes its velvet cloak across our journey as four narratives of healing and debt, of melody and metal, of beacon and carpenter, of woods and woven vows, of commerce and clause, intertwine into the larger tapestry of medieval matrimony. Each union, whether born of necessity, passion, redemption, or revolution, reminds us that marriage is a living story, written in fleeting gestures and enduring bonds. Rest now, for the embers in the hearth glow low. Tomorrow's journey will explore weddings that altered destinies, of queens who crowned themselves, of lovers who defied excommunication, and of secret marriages whose whispers shook kingdoms. Until then, let the crackle of the fire and the hush of these stories send you into the warmth of dreams. The hush of dawn carries a chorus of bird calls through the elm-lined avenue leading to the monastery gates, where we find ourselves on the cusp of a marriage that transcends blood and duty. Brother Anselm, known among the monks for his profound insight into theological texts, stands beside Lady Beatrice, a noblewoman who has taken vows as a lay sister to atone for her family's dark scandal. Their union, blessed by the Archbishop under special dispensation, blurs the line between sacred devotion and human longing. Picture the cloister's central courtyard, ancient cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of sandal and hoof, vine-tangled columns where morning light filters like stained glass. A small assembly gathers. Abbots, prioresses, a handful of noble patrons whose whispers ripple across white-robed figures. Masks of solemnity grace their faces, but behind the carved oak doors of the refectory, the scent of sweet cakes and spiced wine promises quiet celebration. Beatrice wears a habit of simple linen, its hem embroidered with the lilies of her house, while Anselm's tunic is a woven grey textured by devotion. As they face each other beneath a garland of rosemary and jasmine, the abbess intones in Latin, Vos coniungo in vinculo caritatis, ut amicorum et fraterni amoris exemplo. The words hang like incense smoke in the morning air, weaving the personal and the spiritual into a single vow. Their hands clasp, palms calloused by scripture and scrolls on one side, and by embroidery and estate ledgers on the other. Anselm's voice trembles ever so slightly as he promises to guide Beatrice's soul in prayer. She meets his gaze firmly, vowing to stand beside him in service, both to God and to the villagers whose souls they shepherd. Beyond the cloister's walls, the world hums with other stories. In the merchant city of Ravengate, marriage negotiations swirl like autumn leaves in the marketplace. Two merchant families, once bitter rivals, seek to unite through a double marriage. Father and son of one house to mother and daughter of the other. Their talks take place amid stacks of furs and casks of wine, with parchment spread across crates, quills scratching out terms that bind not only hearts, but cargoes and credit lines. Amid these formalities, a young apprentice named Emmeline stands at the edge of the council table, her embroidery basket forgotten as she listens. She steals glances at Captain Roland, a retired guard turned spice trader, who leans in to advise his sister-in-law. Their eyes meet briefly, and in that suspended moment you sense the spark of an untold romance, one that might blossom when the contracts are signed and the scales of coin and obligation are laid to rest. Farther north, where pines whisper ancient secrets, a woodland clearing hosts a rare wedding under the old rites, a druidic hand-fasting on the eve of Imbolc. Toran, a forester's son, and Aera, a healer's apprentice, stand barefoot on a circle of wreaths made from birch and elder. The druid's chant melds earth, water, fire and air with their breath, binding them for a year and a day. Toran's voice is steady as he speaks his vow. By root and leaf, by branch and bone, I bind my life with yours, O healer of hearts, Aera answers, her tone a song carried on breeze, and by petals and petals alone, I pledge my healing hands to you. The forest holds its breath. A stag pauses at the tree line, nostrils quivering, as if to witness their pledge. Meanwhile, in a humble cottage by the marshlands, two peasants rehearse a quiet ritual before dawn. Marike, a widow whose children have flown to distant lords, and Pasquale, a widower burdened by loss, decide to marry not for dowry or debt, but for companionship. Their ceremony requires only the blessing of the midwife, who marks their foreheads with a single drop of rosemary-infused water. They dance in the peat smoke haze, chairs pushed aside, as Marike's grandchildren watch with shy smiles. The steps are clumsy, laughter threading their vows as inseparable as bread and salt. There is no feast beyond soft oatcakes and cider, no parade beyond the winding lane lined with lanterns hung from crooks in the fence. Yet in their simple grace, you feel the essence of medieval marriage's promise: survival, solidarity, solace. As morning deepens into full light, our expedition through marriages continues to unfold, a tapestry of sacred bonds, mercantile alliances, forest rites, and humble hearthside pacts. Each union driven by faith or fortune, by love or necessity, weaves a unique pattern in the grand design of human history. Draw a breath now, for in the next chapter we will witness the marriages of queens who wielded crowns, of lovers who defied papal edicts, and of vows that echoed across centuries. But for now, let the lingering scent of jasmine and rosemary guide you toward your own thoughts, where vows, once spoken, drift onward like petals on a gentle breeze. The dawn air is crisp as you ascend the marble steps of the collegiate church in the capital city, its flying buttresses reaching like skeletal fingers toward the heavens. Today marks a union that will reshape crowns, the self-coronation and marriage of Queen Sibylla of Thornwood to King Roland IV. It is a historic rebellion against tradition, for Sibylla refused to kneel before any monarch, insisting instead on sanctifying her own crown in the eyes of God and her people. Inside, sunlight streams through stained glass, painting the aisles with ruby and sapphire. Sibylla wears a gown of spun moonlight, silver threads danced with blue, and a circlet of uncut diamonds. As she strides past kneeling nobles, she raises her chin, regal and unwavering. At the altar, a hastily convened synod of sympathetic bishops awaits, led by Archbishop Hugo, the only prelate bold enough to endorse her claim. Beside her stands Roland, clad in ceremonial armour engraved with Thornwood's heraldic stag. Their hands touch briefly, his leather glove to her bare hand, signifying equal partnership. Archbishop Hugo recites an adapted rite. By the grace of God and the will of the people, do you, Sibylla, accept this crown to rule as sovereign? I do, she echoes, voice clear as a bell. And you, Roland, do you pledge to stand beside her as consort and co-regent, sharing power and counsel? I do. Then Hugo presses the circlet to her brow, crowned by no man, but by history itself. The congregation erupts in controlled ripples of astonishment and admiration. A decade of war may end today, or a century of tradition may shatter, spilling sparks of revolution across the realm. The self-coronation blurs into the marriage rite without pause. Sibylla and Roland exchange vows not in Latin, but in the vernacular. Sibylla, I bind my life to yours, in peace and in battle, in shadow and in light. Roland, I bind my crown to your counsel, my heart to your honour, my reign to our union. As they clasp, trumpets bloom like heralds of a new era. Outside, the great square fills with banners depicting the stag and the phoenix, the symbols of Thornwood's rebirth. Commoners cheer, soldiers stumble in disbelief. History bends in that moment toward equality, ushered by a queen who dared define her own fate. From royal revolution we turn to clandestine devotion, a secret marriage held in the catacombs beneath the city's oldest church. Here, beneath vaulted brick arches laced with moss, Brother Pilgrim meets his beloved Lady Mariana of Hastings, a noble woman whose faith outranks family ties. Their union defies papal edict, forbidding clerical marriages under harsh penalty. Pilgrim, once a crusader knight, traded sword for scripture after a vision at Acre. Mariana, a widow shunned by her kin for converting to his order, abandoned her title to follow him into faith. They were to live apart, he in the cloister, she as a pilgrim. But love outstripped decree. In the torchlit gloom, they stand before an altar of carved stone. A hermit priest, excommunicated but unbroken, presides. Their vows are spoken softly in Provençal. In life's pilgrimage, we choose each other's company, Mariana whispers, her breath warm on Pilgrim's cheek. In faith and flesh, I claim you as my own, he replies, voice hushed as the crypts echo. They exchange rings, one of twisted copper, the other of braided leather, symbols of unity forged outside sanctified law. As the bell tolls midnight above ground, a dripping seal on the hermit's cassock echoes fate's irony. Love sanctified in shadows may yet blaze into legend. Now shift to a windswept coastal fortress, where the marriage of Lady Gwyneth, heir of the Stormwatch Keep, defies death itself. Allied to the sea's fury, her ancestral line has always served as guardians against pirates and storms. Her husband, Captain Elfric, fell in battle defending the keep from a Norse raiding party. News of his death hollowed the walls with grief, until Gwyneth, clad in widow's black, invoked an ancient vow written on her father's scroll. If death parts us, we shall join again beyond the waters. On the anniversary of his passing, she commandeers Aelfric's longship as a funeral barge. With only her closest kin aboard, she sails into the bay's churning grey arms. The wind howls like sirens, waves crash against timbers. At the ship's prow, she raises a torch made from her husband's cloak and recites her vow. By moon's pale eye and by wave's cruel cry, I join in spirit what death has sought to divide. She casts the torch into the spray, it dips beneath the crests. In that fiery ember sinking, Aelfric's crew sees a spark of flame leap onto the waves, an omen of his spirit guiding her. Legends say his voice rode the gale, whispering, "Ever yours." That night Lady Gwyneth returns alone, her sails torn but her heart whole. In the keep's halls, her people swear loyalty not only to their liege lady but to a love that death could not claim. As twilight deepens, we conclude Canvas 14 at the edge of an ancient altar rock where the kiss of queen and the vow of widow alike hover in the air, shimmering like heat over steel. The scenes of queens crowning themselves, lovers marrying in catacombs, widows defying death, all breathe a single truth. Medieval marriage, bound by contract and crowned by courage, is a mirror of human will. Draw close now and feel the echoes of trumpets and tethered hearts. In the silence that follows, history awaits its next stroke. A hush settles over the ruined amphitheatre at dawn, its once grand tiers now carpeted with moss and wildflowers. Here, in this place built for spectacle, a clandestine wedding unfolds under cracked stone arches and the watchful eyes of ivy-entwined statues. Our couple stands at the centre. Adrian, daughter of a renegade duke who defied the church, and Thomas, a former monk who abandoned his vows to follow her cause. Their union is whispered legend, a bond forged in the fires of rebellion. Picture the broken columns framing a sky streaked with pastel hues. Adrian wears a gown of deep crimson, her father's house colour, dyed with madder and ochre by sympathetic apothecaries. Her hair, loose and wild, is pinned back by silver combs once stashed in secret passages. Thomas stands beside her in a tunic of soft grey wool, his tonsure gone, replaced by a shock of dark curls. He carries a simple wooden cross, carved by hand and imbued with both faith and defiance. A handful of followers, exiles, heretics and wanderers, gather in a ragged semicircle. Among them, a blind bard guides his fingers along the strings of a lute, coaxing a melody that is both mournful and triumphant. Adrian and Thomas exchange vows not in the vernacular nor in Latin but in code, a phrase of the secret rebellion, understood fully only by those present. In storm and shadow, we stand united, Adrian pledges, her voice hushed yet resolute. In hope's bright dawn, we forge our own path, Thomas replies, eyes aflame with conviction. They clasp hands, and the bard's melody swells into a minor chord that lingers in the damp morning air. No ring is exchanged. Instead, Thomas presses a hand-forged iron band against Adrian's palm, a symbol of strength amid ruin. As their words echo across time-worn stone, the small assembly bows heads. In that reverent moment, rebellion and romance entwine, an act of love that carries the weight of political upheaval. Now, let us shift from echoes of insurrection to the solemn hush of a healer's herb-laden arbour, where another wedding of necessity takes place. Here, Lysandra, a renowned herbalist known for curing the plague's worst symptoms, marries Hugh, the royal surgeon who once rivaled her skill. Their union, arranged by royal decree, is meant to combine their talents and quell the kingdom's ever-present fear of death. Suspended baskets of rosemary and lavender drape the arbour's beams. Lysandra wears a dress of muted green hemp, embroidered with sprigs of chamomile and mugwort. Hugh arrives in a plain doublet, a surgical blade strapped to his thigh. They exchange quills dipped in pomegranate ink, signing a contract that outlines their joint responsibilities: a herbarium for the crown, free medicine for the poor, and shared authority over the royal infirmary. The contract's final clause reads, "In life's frailty, may our combined hands mend flesh and spirit, and in our partnership find solace beyond the surgeon's knife and the apothecary's mortar." Hugh signs, then offers Lysandra his hand. She takes it, and the contract is placed in a glass lantern for posterity, illumined by candlelight as a beacon of hope. Meanwhile, beyond city walls in a windswept bog, a unique ritual unfolds as sunbeams pierce the lingering mist. A small band of peat cutters, men and women alike, gather round a hooded pair: Swithin, a bog-revered shaman, and Brigid, chosen from the nearby village for her uncanny ability to navigate the marsh's treacherous paths. Their marriage is a union of land and law, binding mortal and mystic. Swithin's cloak is woven from reeds and adorned with bog oak beads. Brigid's cloak mirrors the muted browns and emerald greens of the fen, flecked with fungus and lichen. They step barefoot into the peat, placing offerings of flax and deer antlers at a stone altar half submerged in water. A hush settles over the ruined amphitheatre at dawn, its once grand tiers now carpeted with moss and wildflowers. Here, in this place built for spectacle, a clandestine wedding unfolds under cracked stone arches and the watchful eyes of ivy-entwined statues. Our couple stands at the centre. Adrian, daughter of a renegade duke who defied the church, and Thomas, a former monk who abandoned his vows to follow her cause. Their union is whispered legend, a bond forged in the fires of rebellion. Picture the broken columns framing a sky streaked with pastel hues. Adrian wears a gown of deep crimson, her father's house colour, dyed with madder and ochre by sympathetic apothecaries. Her hair, loose and wild, is pinned back by silver combs once stashed in secret passages. Thomas stands beside her in a tunic of soft grey wool, his tonsure gone, replaced by a shock of dark curls. He carries a simple wooden cross, carved by hand and imbued with both faith and defiance. A handful of followers, exiles, heretics and wanderers, gather in a ragged semicircle. Among them, a blind bard guides his fingers along the strings of a lute, coaxing a melody that is both mournful and triumphant. Adrian and Thomas exchange vows not in the vernacular nor in Latin, but in code, a phrase of the secret rebellion, understood fully only by those present. In storm and shadow we stand united, Adrian pledges, her voice hushed yet resolute. In hope's bright dawn we forge our own path, Thomas replies, eyes aflame with conviction. They clasp hands, and the bard's melody swells into a minor chord that lingers in the damp morning air. No ring is exchanged. Instead, Thomas presses a hand-forged iron band against Adrian's palm, a symbol of strength amid ruin. As their words echo across time-worn stone, the small assembly bows heads. In that reverent moment, rebellion and romance entwine, an act of love that carries the weight of political upheaval. Now let us shift from echoes of insurrection to the solemn hush of a healer's herb-laden arbour, where another wedding of necessity takes place. Here, Lysandra, a renowned herbalist known for curing the plague's worst symptoms, marries Hugh, the royal surgeon who once rivaled her skill. Their union, arranged by royal decree, is meant to combine their talents and quell the kingdom's ever-present fear of death. Suspended baskets of rosemary and lavender drape the arbour's beams. Lysandra wears a dress of muted green hemp, embroidered with sprigs of chamomile and mugwort. Hugh arrives in a plain doublet, a surgical blade strapped to his thigh. They exchange quills dipped in pomegranate ink, signing a contract that outlines their joint responsibilities: a herbarium for the crown, free medicine for the poor, and shared authority over the royal infirmary. The contract's final clause reads, "In life's frailty, may our combined hands mend flesh and spirit, and in our partnership find solace beyond the surgeon's knife and the apothecary's mortar." Hugh signs, then offers Lysandra his hand. She takes it, and the contract is placed in a glass lantern for posterity, illumined by candlelight as a beacon of hope. Meanwhile, beyond city walls in a windswept bog, a unique ritual unfolds as sunbeams pierce the lingering mist. A small band of peat cutters, men and women alike, gather round a hooded pair: Swithin, a bog-revered shaman, and Brigid, chosen from the nearby village for her uncanny ability to navigate the marsh's treacherous paths. Their marriage is a union of land and law, binding mortal and mystic. Swithin's cloak is woven from reeds and adorned with bog oak beads. Brigid's cloak mirrors the muted browns and emerald greens of the fen, flecked with fungus and lichen. They step barefoot into the peat, placing offerings of flax and deer antlers at a stone altar half submerged in water. The north wind howls through the cavern entrance as they embrace, their armour keys jingling like chimes tolling a new era. In that frozen world, promises are carved as deeply as the ice itself, unchanging, unforgiving, yet bound by necessity. As dawn's pale light creeps across the courtyard and village square, we leave Canvas 16 with hearth-fire marriages, forbidden passions on battlements, communal bonds in church squares, and ice-blood alliances in glacier caverns. Each story adds another stroke of colour to our sprawling tapestry. Rest, if you will, for the flame of history still burns brightly, and tomorrow's journey will guide us through weddings of fate unbidden, of love unshakable, and of vows that echoed beyond the Middle Ages into legend. Beneath a sky-tinted rose by dawn, you find yourself at the gates of Greyhaven's Grand University. Its cloistered courtyards a hive of scholarship and debate. Here, marriage takes the form of intellectual union, binding minds as much as hearts. Within the ivy-wrapped lecture hall, two scholars prepare to wed. Elena, a philosopher whose writings challenge conventional thought, and Marcellus, a mathematician renowned for unlocking the secrets of celestial movements. Their union, sanctioned by neither church nor crown at first, will unite reason and inquiry in a partnership destined to shape the era's greatest discoveries. The hall's benches, carved from dark oak and polished by centuries of use, are filled with students and professors draped in scholarly robes of midnight blue and crimson. Candles flicker along the aisles, casting elongated shadows across columns etched with astrological symbols. As Elena steps to the lectern, her quill and volume of Aristotle in hand, she faces Marcellus with measured poise. In Latin and Greek, she articulates her vow. By the logic of the syllogism and the poetry of the cosmos, I pledge my reason to your inquiry, that together we may unveil truths hidden in stars and syllables. Marcellus responds, his voice steady as the ticking of a celestial sphere. And by the harmony of the spheres and the elegance of equations, I dedicate my calculations to your discourse, that our union may chart courses not only through heavens but through minds. They exchange copper circlets, hers inscribed with geometric symbols, his with philosophical maxims, before sealing their vows with a shared kiss beneath the arch, emblazoned with the university seal. The audience erupts in enthusiastic applause, some hissing with envy, others murmuring of the unprecedented precedent set by this union of intellects. Stepping out into the cloistered courtyard, they are greeted with bouquets of laurel and bay, tokens of academic honour. But beyond scholarly laurels, their marriage carries deeper weight. It will form the foundation of a new academy where disciplines entwine, where poems might include proofs, and where ethics and arithmetic dance in tandem. Not far away, in a narrow alley of the textile quarter, marriage manifests in vibrant colour. Emma, a master dyer famed for her revolutionary pigments, is to marry Alric, a master weaver whose tapestries hang in royal chambers. Their union is heralded by swaths of dyed cloth draped across beams, each hue more daring than the last, lavenders that shimmer like moonlight, crimsons deep as pomegranate juice, and emeralds that gleam like dew-drenched leaves. Emma stands beside vats bubbling with crushed berries and iron salts. Alric arrives carrying a bolt of undyed wool, its fleece gleaming in the morning sun. Amid the swirl of pigments, they dip strands of wool into the vats together, Emma guiding Alric's hand as he gathers a skein, and he guiding her hand in winding it onto the reel. Their coordinated movements, the flick of dye, the twist of wool, become their ceremony. As the skeins dry on racks outside their workshop, they whisper vows painted in colour. "With every hue I create, may you see my heart," Emma says, gesturing to the golden saffron dyed with a flourish of turmeric. "And with every thread I weave, may you feel my devotion," Alric replies, tracing a pattern in the fabric that depicts intertwined vines. Their union will revolutionize the textile guild. Patterns will incorporate new pigments, and guild charters will recognize the dyer and weaver as equals in creation. Meanwhile, beneath the arches of a serene monastery garden, marriage takes on pastoral simplicity. Friar Benedict, weary from years of tending to plague victims in the city, has surrendered his habit to wed Helena, a widow whose 2 sons he once apprenticed in herbalism. Their ceremony, held at dawn's first light, involves a shared bowl of lavender-infused porridge and the planting of a young olive sapling, a symbol of peace, resilience, and nourishment. Helena pours honey and milk into the sapling's shallow hole, murmuring, "May our lives nourish one another as this tree grows." Benedict, placing a hand on her shoulder, adds, "And may our roots intertwine beneath life's soil, drawing strength from shared purpose." They water the sapling together, and its young leaves glisten as if touched by benediction. Finally, we journey to the windswept moor, where the medieval festival of the May Queen unfolds. Here, marriage rituals blend folklore and festivity in a communal rite beyond private vows. A young blacksmith's apprentice, Leda, is crowned May Queen, an honorary title for that day only, and dances at the head of a procession of maidens and youths garbed in white tunics bound with garlands. As tradition dictates, she selects her May King by plucking a ribbon from the maypole's spinning ribbons. Choosing Rowan, the herbalist's apprentice, she ties the ribbon on his tunic. Together they lead a circle dance around the pole, boot heels stamping, hands held aloft. This circle shrinks and expands with the weaving of the ribbons, laughter ringing like bells through the heather-scented air. Though their union is ephemeral, valid only until dusk, it mirrors the promise at the heart of marriage: partnership, joy, and shared ritual. When the sun dips, they release the ribbons, their bond returning to the collective spirit of the village. Thus, Canvas 17 draws to a close on a tapestry of vows, the scholar's pact of reason, the artisan's dance of colour, the gardener's seedling of peace, and the festival's fleeting marriage of community. Each scene deepens our journey through medieval matrimony's many faces, intellectual alliances, creative collaborations, simple sustenance, and folkloric celebration. Rest now, and let the dawn's promise of new discoveries, vibrant hues, tender growth, and seasonal joy carry you toward Canvas 18's tales of unwavering loyalty, daring rescues, and clandestine bonds. A pale dawn mist drapes over the ivy-clad archways of St. Edric's Abbey as we step quietly into Canvas 18. Our tale unfolds in the hushed corridors where vows are whispered between cloister walls. Sister Elsbeth, a former noblewoman turned novice, and Brother Aldwyn, an aged monk renowned for his illuminated manuscripts, share a bond that transcends earthly station. A union sanctioned by neither church law nor secular custom, but by the promise of shared sanctuary. Picture the abbey's scriptorium bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Shelves lined with parchment and ink pots border long tables where monks and nuns transcribe sacred texts. Elsbeth enters, her habit's hem brushing stone floors, a single sunbeam tracing gold flecks in her hair. Aldwyn, perched upon a low stool, raises his gaze from an intricate illumination depicting the tree of Jesse. His eyes, still bright despite lines of age, soften as he sets his quill aside. Together they advance to a simple wooden altar covered in white linen. A single candle flickers, its flame dancing in silent witness. There is no grand procession, only two souls seeking mutual solace. Aldwyn extends a vellum scroll upon which he has written their vows. In the silence of these halls we bind our lives to prayer and to one another. May our hearts be as steadfast as these stones, our faith a beacon in dark times. Elsbeth accepts the scroll and with a trembling hand adds her own line in crimson ink. In the reflection of these candles we see the light of hope. May our union be hidden from mortal eyes, but blessed by the divine. They fold the scroll together and entwine thumbs, sealing their promises with a hidden symbol known only to the Abbey's inner circle. No ring is exchanged, only a shared glance that speaks volumes beyond any worldly ornament. Let us shift now to the rolling heathland outside, where marriage weaves through the lives of wandering reavers, border clans known for raiding and resilience. Within a stone circle at the heath's edge, two young reaver leaders, Catrin of the Wildfell clan and Duncan of the Thistlemore clan, carve peace from hostility through an arranged marriage meant to end generations of blood feuds. A stand of weathered monoliths marks their meeting place, heather blooms purple between each, its perfume sharp on the cold breeze. Catrin arrives astride a grey mare, her cloak of wolf pelts rustling as she dismounts. Duncan greets her with a wary nod, his boots caked in mud from last night's ride. A priest of the old faith, exiled to these borderlands for his unorthodox rites, presides. He uncovers a chalice from beneath his robes, a cup of brackenwood, and pours 2 measures of mead from a carved horn. As Catrin and Duncan drink, the priest intones, "By the blood of ancestors and the breath of the wind, may your clans unite through this bond." They pass the chalice back and forth, sharing sips until the horn is empty. Then, in silence that carries the weight of history, Catrin places a braided leather girdle upon Duncan's waist, and he, in turn, crowns her with a circlet of twisted bracken sprigs. This simple rite binds their clans in fragile peace, witnessed only by the stones and the warring skies overhead. Next, we journey into the hidden chambers of the royal palace, where marriage becomes a weapon and a shield. Lady Isolde, envoy of the Eastern Marches, negotiates her own hand in marriage with Prince Cedric, son of the realm's most powerful regent. In the palace's private solar, they convene amid tapestries depicting legendary unions that secured kingdoms. Isolde stands before a carved oak table, quill poised over a thick treaty detailing territorial exchanges, trade agreements, and mutual defence pacts. Cedric offers her a final clause. In joining your line with mine, you shall retain sovereignty over your eastern lands, with equal voice in council and right to bear the sceptre in my stead when I am absent. Isolde smiles, her eyes calculating yet warm, and counters. In return, I pledge my sword to your cause and my counsel to your court, so long as my people's welfare remains guiding principle. They sign with simultaneous strokes, sealing their bond with ink that symbolises power as much as promise. No chapel is necessary. This marriage stands as testament to political savvy, mutual respect, and the pursuit of stability in a fractious land. Finally, as twilight's lavender hues envelop the countryside, we rest at the edge of an ancient oak grove, where forest folk celebrate a marriage under moonlight. A woodcutter named Arik and a huntress named Freya choose no priest or scribe but look to nature itself as witness. They stand within a circle of starlit glade where fireflies drift like embers. Freya plucks an acorn from a low-hanging branch and places it in Arik's palm. He presses it there, then hands her a thistle blossom. By oak's strength and thistle's thorn, Arik declares, voice rich in moonlit hush, we bind our fates as sturdy and resilient. Freya smiles, raising her blossom. By swift hunt and faithful watch, we join our paths until the stars dim. They entwine hands and step into the tapestry of shadow and light, their vow echoing in the hush of the oak's embrace. And so, Canvas 18 draws to a close. Hidden abbey unions, river peace rites, palatial pacts, and moonlit forest vows, all threads woven into our medieval marriage mosaic. Rest now, for tomorrow's dawn will invite stories of love that defied tyranny, alliances born from prophecy, and devotions that kindled legends beyond memory. The moon drifts high above the crude wooden bridge where two rivers converge, casting silver light on the damp planks as we begin Canvas 19. Below, currents swirl in restless union, an apt mirror for the marriage about to unfold. This night, two strangers from estranged territories meet to bind their destinies amid water's whisper. Sir Matthias of the River Guard arrives first, his cloak soaked with mist, his steel helm tucked under one arm. He is charged with defending the waterways against smugglers and raiders, loyal to Duke Reynard, who rules the northern marches. Opposite him stands Marisol, a cartographer's daughter from the southern lands of Lysandra, her maps more cherished than her prospects. Her father's fortunes declined. Her hand is offered in marriage to secure justice for lost fleets. They stand beneath a wooden arch carved with wave motifs, torches flickering at its base. No priest officiates here. Instead, Marisol places a rolled chart upon a moss-covered stone. Matthias unrolls it, tracing its silvered ink with wary fingers. By river's flow and charted course, I bind my oath to yours, Marisol declares, eyes bright in torch glow. Matthias lifts his helm, revealing storm-grey eyes, and by watchful helm and stilled oar, I pledge my blade to guard your path. They press palms upon the map, sealing their vow in ink and breath. A breeze stirs, the river's murmur swells, carrying their promise downstream to unseen ears. In the bustling courtyard of the Silkweavers' Guild next morning, marriage takes on the sheen of mercantile flair. Lady Aisha, heiress to the guild's vast fortunes, weds Lord Liang, ambassador from the far kingdoms. Their union is celebrated not only with ceremony, but with silk banners dyed in lapis and indigo, each banner inscribed with intertwined phoenix and dragon. Beneath a canopy of crimson silk, Aisha's gown glides like water over marble. Lord Liang offers her a jade pendant, a token from his homeland, carved with auspicious characters for harmony. She takes it, their fingers brushing in a gesture laden with both political accord and a hint of genuine curiosity. Their vows, spoken in both tongues, echo like poetry. By silk's smooth thread and spiced roads begin, our houses join in trust and kin. By jade's cool heart and woven weave's delight, I stand beside you, beyond day's light. Silks ripple overhead as they seal their promises, a breeze carrying petals of exotic blooms across the gathered dignitaries. Now, let us descend to the shadowed alleys of Black Market Row where marriage is survival's gamble. Sienna, a street urchin who bartered her freedom for a safe home, marries Finn, a pickpocket whose nimble fingers saved her life more than once. Their ceremony is a clandestine nod. No rings, no feasts, just a stolen scrap of parchment inscribed with a scrawl of vows. By cloak of night and hidden street, I choose your shadow over mine to keep. They seal it with a fingerprint and candle wax, sharing a smirk before disappearing into the crowd, bonded by mutual trust in a world that trusts no one. Finally, we journey to the Highlands where marriage is a battle of wills. Clan McRae's chieftain, Torquil, weds Eblin, daughter of the rival Clan O'Donnell, to secure peace. They meet atop a windswept hill under the standing stones of their ancestors. Highland pipes drone in the distance, mingling with the call of ravens overhead. Torquil, clad in tartan mantle, offers Eblin a silver dirk, an emblem of both protection and power. She accepts, slipping the dirk into her belt, stepping close. By rugged cliff and heathered brae, we forge our bond this Highland way. Eblin replies, voice strong against the gale, by misty glen and roaring tide our clans unite, no more to divide. They clasp hands, eyes alight with fierce resolve, as the pipes swell to a triumphant crescendo, sealing peace in bloodline tradition. As the dawn's first glow kisses the rivers, silks, streets, and stones, Canvas 19 draws its final breath, woven of waterbound pledges, silk-laden alliances, shadowed bargains, and Highland daybreaks. Rest now, for tomorrow's final canvas will close our tapestry with 2 more journeys, awaiting around the bend, vows etched in legend, echoes that ring beyond memory. The first light of dawn spills across the battlefield's quiet aftermath, where banners lie tattered and swords rest buried in the dewy grass. From this field of loss, 2 figures emerge, a nurse tending the wounded, and a knight unafraid to lower his helm. Their hands meet in a promise born not of ceremony, but of compassion amid chaos. She is Mariette, a humble healer whose herbs saved his life when arrows pierced his armour. He is Sir Etienne, whose valour turned the tide of war, yet whose greatest battle now is the one within his own heart. Their union is unspoken, lived in each shared glance as she cools his fevered brow, and he offers half his cloak against the night's chill. In the hush of the morning's mist they craft vows as simple as the loaves she bakes. I will stand with you on storm-tossed fields, he whispers, and I will tend your wounds, seen and unseen, she replies. No priest, no feast, just 2 souls refusing to be broken by the world's cruelties. Let us shift from the battlefield to the gilded throne room of a fallen dynasty. The last princess, Avelina, kneels before her people to wed the man they once called traitor, Lord Corbin, whose cunning saved the kingdom from treason's brink. Their marriage restores peace, yet their love blossoms from ashes of betrayal. In mirrored obsidian floors and walls draped with morning black, they stand side by side. Avelina extends a jewelled goblet. Corbin offers a simple wooden spoon carved with their intertwined initials. They dine together before court, bread and broth served in joyful defiance of past sorrows. Their vows echo in candlelit corridors. By trust reborn and grace reclaimed, we reclaim hope for our realm. Now, above the cliffs battered by sea's fury, a pair of exiles seals their bond in the vault beneath a lighthouse beacon. Elara, once noble-born, and Finian, a pirate-turned-privateer, exchange rings forged from ship's rigging, knotted cord clasped by a simple iron ring. Their union defies law and law, but in the pulse of the lighthouse's light, they pledge themselves to each other's freedom. Through storm and strait, through calm and gale, Finian vows, beyond the horizon we set our sail. Elara grips his hand, the metal warm against her palm. Wherever we wander, we'll find our home, she declares. Finally, we draw our tapestry to a close on the edge of a twilight forest glade, where an ancient oak holds the last echoes of our medieval marriages. Beneath its sprawling limbs, an elderly couple, once separated by kingdoms, reunite to renew their vows after decades apart. Their love, tested by distance and duty, stands as testament to the enduring power of devotion. They clasp hands, weathered and worn, and repeat the words they first spoke as young hearts. By oak's strength and time's embrace, we bind our souls in endless grace. And as the moonlight filters through leaf and limb, their voices join the chorus of centuries, weaving the final thread in our tapestry. 2 more journeys await around the bend. Don't miss them. Subscribe and ring that bell.